I'd like to thank the ProArts Gallery for putting up with me and my show for the last 2.5 months. Thank you, ProArts Gallery, local, non-profit gallery. You know, they throw all kinds of interesting events here, like multi-generational, it's a pretty astonishing place. And they're like almost all nonprofits these days, they're underfunded, and so they use a lot of community organization, and they put together a lot of events. Mike, the sound guy here, does a lot of events. They use this gallery really well. It gets a lot of use, and not a big space and not a lot of money, but a lot of stuff happens here, and I'm really, really pleased to be here at ProArts Gallery. Thank you to Natalia, Mike, Grace, and the entire house here. Kalahari Printing right next door here, who've helped out with the show, and Marta, who's got the show in the front window also, which you should check out, please. And so anyway, so Scott Beale, who's somewhere around here, Scott Beale, there he is, right there. Oh my God. So I'm going to have to kind of give a real. I think a lot of you people kind of know a lot of this history, but for the sake of those of you that don't. I'm going to kind of just really briefly touch on some things. And so San Francisco, kind of the underground art scene in San Francisco, or the underground pranks and event scene in San Francisco, goes back, you know, to the 20s, basically, and maybe even before that. I mean, the city's always been, it's a place where some wag at some point said that, you know, if you shook the country and all the fruits and nuts rolled down, they'd roll into San Francisco. Oscar Wilde said that if anyone who disappeared was said to be seen in San Francisco. And it's always been that kind of place. And Oakland, across the bay from San Francisco, has taken up a lot of that mantle in the last, 20, 30 years, and also had an incredible history, you know, all on its own. But a lot of the people, you know, as we know, being gentrified out of San Francisco, moved to Oakland, so it's kind of a central scene. But in San Francisco and in Oakland, the groups that I've been involved in, very fortunately, for my entire adult life here in San Francisco, starting with Communiversity and the San Francisco Suicide Club, which is an urban exploration adventures group. Communiversity was part of the Free University movement, influenced by the free speech movement in Berkeley in the 60s. And so there are a bunch of people in the room tonight from the Suicide Club. Steve Mobia over here on sound, who's one of the main organizers in the Suicide Club. Louise Jarmilowicz is in here. You know, we've got Kathy Kay and Bob Campbell came down from, so there are a lot of folks from that group in here. That group was a pretty astonishing group and had a lot of, we didn't know it at the time, we had no idea, we were just doing what we were doing, but it seems to have had a lot of influence on some things that came later. The Cacophony Society grew out of that group. Cacophony, we kind of called it a little bit of a kinder, gentler suicide club in a way. And it's an amazing group and very fortunate to be involved in it. And so Scott came along, we'd been doing Cacophony for some years, and Scott's involvement began in 95, and we had been doing events, and we were all basically completely broke. And so just putting the events on was always a lot of work, and we did it for the love of doing it. What Scott did when he showed up, first he was a filmmaker, and he had just made a film on Alonzo Smith, who's a little known, he should be much better known, California surrealist painter. And Scott had made, it wasn't quite a feature, what was it, like 60 minutes?
Yeah, like 70. Yeah.
70 minutes,
yeah.
Like 70-minute film. And he'd made this film, and so he was starting to come to events, and he wanted people to come and check out his film, and that's kind of how we initially met him. And then so you want to talk about how we first...
The film came out in 96.
Right, the film did come out in 96, but you were working on it.
How I first met you, or how I first... I mean, it's a lot of different layers.
A lot of different things, but just to say, so Scott basically started videotaping events that we were doing.
Well, first photos.
What?
95 was all photos.
Right, not taking photos, and he would just give photos to the people who were doing the event. We didn't have enough money or didn't have the forethought or the time or energy to record our own events, and Scott started doing that, and just giving us, you know, the recordings of the events and later videotapes of the events.
I used to show up after events with a VHS tape and hand it to the artist.
Hand the VHS,
whoever did the show or event, I had a dub for them.
Yes, and we were like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me, you taped that thing? And so because of that, a lot of this stuff still survives to this day. Scott Beale was one of the main videographers of the group originally. Doug Wellman was another major one, and Chuck Serino filmed a lot of stuff that was going on at that point in time. So, and then you want to talk about how we first met, or?
How I met you? 'Cause it's a funny story.
Yeah, it's a funny one.
Well, so I mean, really, Burning Man was the beginning, like it is with a lot of people. Although I had heard of Cacophony through P. Siegel. Actually, I went to her house.
Siegel, yeah.
And that's a whole other story. Let me think. So when I was at Burning Man, I saw it was I don't know if it was a survival. I think it was a survival guide.
Right, the survival guide.
And it
from
had this naked guy covered in playa mud holding a shotgun. And it said John the Bathless. I'm
Yeah.
like, who is this guy?
You've heard of playa names, right? There's a whole thing where you make up this kind of like a goofy character, and then you become that character. And if you're not careful, you really become the character. Okay, you probably know about that.
So it was just a photo. I'm like, what is it? I mean, I was still trying to figure the whole thing out. It was like first year.
He was from Ohio, and it was all confusing.
Yeah. Okay.
I started in Michigan.
Come on.
I started in Michigan.
This is like a
so
Tales of the City kind of stereotype, right?
Yeah, and it is, but there's truth to it. I came from Michigan, and when I first showed up here, I was like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. It was pretty astonishing. Everybody told me the party had ended, 8 years before when I showed up here, and they were wrong.
So
about that.
so after the burn, we're all hanging out in center camp, and we're like, all right, what do we do? Oh, there's a bulletin board. Let's burn the bulletin board because it's that's the only thing left. At
1996,
that point. 95.
95, that's right.
95.
Yeah.
So then John stopped by, and I'm like, oh, it's that John the Bathless guy, but he's got clothes on now. And
Thank God.
And a radio, so he must be more involved in a way. So he's kind of stopped by and sort of like checked it, and I wasn't like, all right, just let it go. Like it was like he might have stopped it, but not.
Yeah, it was basically, we used to pretty much burn everything, and at that point in time, there's a moment there. I think Jennifer Holmes was there too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer. But I think we looked at each other and we thought about kind of stopping people burning the bulletin board, and then we said, you know what? No, we're not gonna do that.
So that was the first time I actually saw John. Still hadn't talked to him, and then I was trying to think. A lot of things happened, and eventually I ended up at the Halloween party at
1907 Golden Gate,
P.
P.
Siegel's
place.
And then I actually finally met John Law, who was Charles Manson that night.
It was Halloween. And
yeah, it was Halloween. Yeah. I mean, so it's Charles Manson. So I still don't really so Charles Manson. And then, this is a long story. So I'd heard about Cacophony through all these things, and like, okay, fine, I'm gonna sign up for the newsletter. They have a physical newsletter they mail to you. Yeah. Monthly?
That's correct. Every month we did.
Monthly.
So the rotating editorship of the newsletter, as with the earlier Suicide Club, so no one really controlled it. The editorship would go to one person one month and another person the next month. So no one really.
It came with this great collage art on the
envelope. Louise
envelope.
Armilowitz did a lot of the collage art, most of it for that.
Yep.
Handmade.
So it shows up. I'm in my Haight Street studio. Newsletter shows up. That was so exciting. I open it up, going through all the events, and that night was a meeting. That actual night, I'm like, I should go to this meeting. But I was worried that it was like some kind of initiation ritual
or a
whatever.
cult.
It said meet, meet at Tommy's joint. Like that weird place on Van Ness? What? Okay. So I go in there, I'm like, what is this? And they're like, upstairs. Okay, so I go upstairs, and then there's all these
normal-looking people.
Pretty normal old dudes, like.
You weren't.
I was younger.
You were younger, that's right.
Anyway, and then I'm like, wait a second. There's that Danger Ranger guy, and then there's the mud whatever guy.
Radcliffe. And
you're all just up there and just kind of being normal, and people are talking about what they might want to do. And it was like, I'm like, wait, where's the weirdness?
It was
really funny because and I think that's when I first talked to you. Actually met.
That was the
you
first
properly.
time we properly met. But it's like what it was. It's like Cacophony. Like Chuck Palahniuk described Cacophony in the introduction to our Tales of the San Francisco Cacophony book as a group of fairly normal people who, on weekends and nights, would get dressed up in weird shit and go out and basically live these weird fantasies.
Right.
So, but it was basically normal workaday, average kind of folk, and that's pretty much.
So and I don't remember after that, but then it very quickly immersed myself in the whole thing. But we should back up because there was when I went to Burning Man for the first year, and I was shooting photos, and I got on the plane, and it was just so exciting. Just ran off and just started shooting photos of everything. It was so visual, I mean, as it still is.
As it is.
And so I came back, and I'm like, I want to show my friends like this crazy thing I went to. And back then, of course, you go print photos and make a photo album. So I had a cocktail party at my house.
Correct.
So people could come look physically, look at the actual photo albums. It's such a
right.
weird concept
You were
now,
doing that.
right?
Peter Field was doing that also as well.
Yeah. But I didn't know any of these guys yet, right?
Yeah.
So
it was a time when people didn't take a photo of everything that they did every 2 minutes. basically.
Right.
So photos were kind of rare, actually.
Well, I mean, you were limited by the number of rolls of films you had, and you couldn't buy any more film on the playa, that's for sure. You maybe barter for some. With some toilet paper or something.
Right. That was good. Wiedemann's beer.
So all my friends were there, and they're checking it out. And then these strange people started showing up, and these guys in these weird costumes, and a guy with a spring on his head. Like, what is going on?
That was Chris de Monterey.
Well, no, you're getting ahead there, John. So all these people keep showing up on it's like the first block of Haight Street, little studio apartment. And I go up to this guy, a normal-looking guy, right? And then I'm like, how did you hear about this party? And he pulls out this printout of my email that somebody had forwarded to the Burning Man discussion list. It was not run by Burning Man. It was just a list that was run.
And it was at a time when that was fairly rare. You know, that kind of communication wasn't something that everybody did every day.
And I found out later it was Stuart Mangrum had sent it over there, right? He may not admit to that. But anyway, so then people kept showing up. So the guys in the costume, there was a cacophony event apparently that was I guess there was a big pile of like clothing that people had to make costumes. I think it was exquisite costume, but you guys might be able to.
An event that had happened was an
and so those guys were showing up because they'd heard about the Burning Man party. And then over time, people kept showing up. Michael shows up. I didn't really know him yet. Flash shows up. Larry Harvey shows up. Chris Radcliffe shows up. All in my house. I have video of this too, so I'm not making it up. And then later on, I'm like finding out.
They were all talking to
I didn't
each
know who
other.
these people were. I'm like, the guy in a hat, he's here. Like all these people that I started finding out were organizers. Dana was there. Like all these people, all these people were there.
Major organizer.
And so I was joked. I was pulled right in. I had no choice at that point. These guys are in my living room.
And we wouldn't leave.
Yeah, and you weren't even there. You didn't even. You're already like Burning Man party, right? No, I'm just kidding. That was before that. That way you were still involved.
Yeah, and so Scott's involvement, he was really the link between early Cacophony and the very early Burning Man. He's one of the main links between that group and between this burgeoning and growing internet community. And starting one of the early event blogs.
Right. Oh yeah, so I could tell you about this. It's called the Squid List.
Right.
I used to go. It was originally the Alpha Squid List.
How do you know? How many people here know what that is? The Squid List. Oh,
wow.
Okay.
So originally it was the Alpha Squid List, and I was from Brave New World, and it was like I did this whole thing. No.
Oh, the number. The number.
No, it wasn't a phone number. No, that's separate.
Oh, you want to talk about the number too?
No, let's talk about the Squid List, right? No?
Squid List first. Okay.
So what happened is we got back from Burning Man. It was just '96. I got back, and it was like, are we going to sit down finally? No, I was kidding.
I'm just going to. Bob Lou, give me a break.
Okay, so anyway, it was more of like, what are these amazing artists doing the rest of the year? So I created a BCC list of 100 people that I met from the scene, and I would just basically send out stuff of like what they're doing, like what are all these artists doing, and then people are like, oh, can you add me to that list? And so then I made it more into a formal email list.
Yeah.
And then later on, years later, it was a calendar, and so that's how that.
And I wasn't involved in that at all because I couldn't even type at the time. I didn't have a computer. I didn't really understand that they were necessary.
He was
they actually weren't
anti-technology.
necessary at that time. But they became necessary later, of course.
John, he was fax machine back then. That's about as far as he would go.
We did have a fax. But the important point being that Scott was kind of this connecting link, to this technology.
Yeah, 96, yeah.
And using the technology in ways that helped, with the creative endeavors that we were doing. And we weren't the first, or maybe certainly not the only people doing it at the time, but it was a fairly early kind of thing. And the utilization of that technology was fresh and new. And
now email lists are popular again. Like other things have come back.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Somewhat. Kind of. Where are we going with that? Well, you guys were talking about the number was a thing that came later on. It was a phone number you could call. We actually printed this little business card size thing, and it had a pound sign for the number. Another side was a phone number, and you called it. And each week we updated. We had different celebrity voices from our scene record the event.
Hi, this is Dr. Hal Robbins.
Everybody. Anyone we could find, and then you call, and you never knew it was going to be. And we had a script for them, and Lori did it. Lori did it for a while too, and I think that was '96. The timeline there's all this stuff overlaps.
Yeah, it's interesting. But how did you know? What I want to ask you about is when you were in Ohio. You told me that you had heard about some things going on in San Francisco. Well, this is like pre-internet, so you had to find out things through different communication methods. Through bongo drums or cans with strings or whatever we were using back then. So how did you know about this stuff?
Well, zines for sure. Zine culture was huge back then.
Which are you folks know what zines are, right? Most of you.
It's the
paper
magazine, and then it's like
Yeah.
Xerox machines.
Usually very creative endeavors of one or two people getting
paste.
together and with whatever obsession that they have, and then printing it up and sending it out.
So also, the research books, VVale is
Research
here. I mean,
books,
that
yeah.
was...
Research books.
I came across those, obviously, and,
Yeah.
you know, going to like alternative bookstores and stuff like that. Also, Church of Subgenius, which wasn't directly tied to it, but I knew
There was a lot of
were,
crossover, yeah.
there were some weird people out there, you know.
And so, like a lot of folks in Ohio and in Idaho
Ohio
and in you know and in Iowa,
They're different
Florida,
states, yeah, that's what I said.
you know, they'd hear about stuff happening in San Francisco and the Bay Area when stuff was really that sort of thing was really happening.
And the
there.
whole culture. I mean, I only go back to the Beats and the '60s,
Yeah.
and then Grateful Dead, even, you know, like it or not,
That's
like
why
all
I
that
came out
stuff
here.
was, you know.
That's why I came out here, because as a kid I'd heard about, you know, there's this mystical, you know, like image of the Bay Area as being a place
Oh,
where
this is a good
anything
segue.
could happen.
This is a good segue. So my high school friend, David Klass, who is also a business partner in Laughing Squid with John Law, we came out to San Francisco. Well, so in 1987, we went to LA. We actually stayed in Hollywood, like Hollywood and Vine, like the really nasty when it was back there.
Yeah, it was
and
a
my
rough
friend was
neighborhood.
going to the Guitar Institute, so we stayed with him. Then we came up to San Francisco, and I think it was just based on where we were staying, gave the city such a contrast because we stayed with David's aunt on Telegraph Hill, on Filbert Steps.
Right.
And we were dog sitting for her, and so that was our first impression of San Francisco compared to Hollywood and Vine. And
Yeah.
like we just fell in love with the city.
Well,
and
Filbert Steps is one of the most beautiful places
right.
in any city.
But we didn't know.
anywhere.
We're like, oh, this is what San Francisco is
normal,
like,
yeah.
and LA is this whatever that was, because we were like broke and we were just exploring what we could, and so that was '87, and then we go back, you know, and then one day I just came home and said, fuck it, why don't we just move to San Francisco?
How many of you did that out there?
Yeah, that's the classic thing, right?
How many just said, like, hell, I'm getting out of here, I'm going
It
to
was
San
just
Francisco?
kind of like
a lot of people.
we kind of were at the, you know, there wasn't much happening. We're out of college. It was just like, all right, you know, the job's not that exciting. Let's just pack up and do it. And, you know, and that's how we moved out. And that was in '92.
Yeah.
And I could segue a little more on that. So when I came out, I was really fascinated with the sort of new rave scene, right? The rave culture. I knew it was big in Europe and in London especially. But like I was fascinated with it because I'd go to Haight Street and pick up the flyers and then, you know, call the number and, you know, find out where it is, or they change it and go to the drop and all that stuff. So we started exploring all that. And so this is kind of parlays a little bit into, I knew they did raves at Pyramid Lakes. When I first heard
Right.
Burning Man, I thought it was a rave because I thought, oh, it's just like another.
It was not a rave.
I know.
Yeah.
But there was a rave camp. John's favorite camp, rave camp, we all know, right?
Well, it's funny because the organizers, my co-organizers, when we talked about it, like in '92, you know, Ted and Spaz wanted to come out. That was the first rave out there at the desert, and a lot of people didn't want that to happen out there. And so my compromise was that we'd have rave camp and set it 2 miles away from the.
Well, no, it
from the main
was
camp.
1 mile, and then the next year
It was
we
1
did 2
mile
miles.
first, and then,
Yeah,
and then
I remember that.
it forced to be two
Which
miles.
and I was doing, well, let's say, jumping ahead. So after '95, I came back and I started switching to video and shooting video. '95 was all photography. And so I was thinking of doing, we're kind of getting out of order, but I had done a previous documentary, and so I was thinking about doing another one, and I wanted to do something on Burning Man '96. And I was talking to our friend Stuart Mangrum about it, and so he was out helping me with it. And I remember being at Burning Man, and I was like, I haven't done the rave camp yet because it's so far, and like because you put it 2 miles away, and then after the man burn, like I gotta ride my bike to the rave camp so I could at least get footage of that to be, because I actually and some of you guys might know that there's a group called Wicked, which is legendary in San Francisco that did raves, and then they were also out on the
came out.
playa.
They were the second rave camp to come out.
So
yeah,
I actually shot footage of a Wicked rave at the King Street Garage way before the ballpark. And you don't really, you know, a lot of those places don't like you shooting video, but I shot the whole thing, and then the idea was to like dissolve that into the Burning Man thing.
Yeah. So how did this sort of like segue into you shooting videos of everybody's events? Because that's what I really remember you for.
No, because
originally.
I got the camera. Actually, I borrowed. You might not know. My first camera I borrowed from Hernan Cortez.
Hernan Cortez, yeah, sure.
Oh, Hernan.
Who was the first, the first sound
got some
guy.
Hernan fans here.
Yeah. It did a lot of really amazing.
Yeah.
Worked on some cacophony events.
He also did.
He did the bus.
What was it called? You guys know what it was called. We took the bus around the. What was that called?
Yeah, it was the. What's it?
Yes,
Popcorn, the Popcorn
Anti-Theater.
Anti-Theater bus, yeah.
So-
Which was a site-specific, they put the performers and the audience in the bus and then drive to different locations.
Different, like
and do
a
presentations.
loading dock, and there'd be like a play or performance.
And do the player performance until we got thrown out, and then jump back in the bus and go to the next
So that's how I started
location.
shooting video, because then I got my own camera.
Yeah.
So I shot 40 hours for Burning Man 96. Every single organizer in their house, John at his house in Emeryville in his bathrobe, with Don Herron, former speaker here.
Right.
And I went to every organizer's house and shot everything, like all the SOMART stuff.
Yeah.
that
And you
we
can see
did.
some of Scott's videos later on these video players over here. There's the Meat Parade, which is one of my personal favorites. But yeah, if you get a chance to, you just hit the button and the video plays, and then hit another button and another video
So I'm
plays.
shooting all the Burning Man stuff, and of
Yeah.
course I'm going to also shoot all the other things that happened, and I just brought my camera around and just shot nonstop from 96 to 99, kind of fading out around there, occasionally bringing it out, and then sometimes switching back to photography. But so that archive, I've actually digitized it all. I haven't put it anywhere, but some of it, like John said, is here. And part of it, we should go back. There's a segue that's perfect for this.
Right.
Is it when I'm kind of going out of order? I did a documentary previously
On Alonzo Smith, who's this
maybe
wonderful.
we'll talk about.
Yeah, you should look him up. Alonzo Smith. He was a California surrealist painter in the 40s.
So I mean, the quick story on that. There's a place, Rock Gallery, which some of you guys remember, which was like a poster art place on Mission Street, I think. And my friend David Klass, the guy I moved out with, he said, there's this amazing painter I found there, and it doesn't really match up with the other guys. There's like Alex Gray and these more contemporary guys. That's a really long story. Let's just say, so we could just pre-search, pre-web, really? So like, how do you find this guy?
How do you find somebody
I went
like
to the
that,
library and looked up the artist, and I started finding local articles on him, and I realized maybe he's a local guy. So we actually just got a phone book and looked for him, because his name's Alonzo, so it's a little unique, Alonzo Smith.
Yeah.
We found one, we called it, and we're like, and this woman answered, and we're like, we're looking for this artist Alonzo Smith, and she's like, oh, he's my husband. I'll put him on the phone.
And ended up making a movie about this guy.
Oh,
which
and
is
the
really
next step is, well, where did we see your paintings? I mean, we saw one. He's like, oh, they're in our house. Just come down. They're in San Carlos.
Yeah.
So we drove down, and they're lovely people, and so we got to know them, going to art shows, and then I was looking for a project, and I asked them about doing a documentary, and that's where that came from.
So also to kind of continue on, because Scott was also a big connection between this kind of this underground like events and art scene and the rising internet world. I'd like to ask you if you talk a little bit about that, about some of the guys that you came to know and gals that you came to know in the larger, what became the larger internet
maybe we
world.
should talk about. Here's a good way.
There's a solid connection between.
No, here's a good. So, went to Burning Man '95. Shot a bunch of photos. I came back. So at that time, there was a guy. What was that? Oh yeah, '95. Here's the '95. So I came. So at that time, the Burning Man was on the Well, which you guys might
On the
people
Well,
know the Well,
which
which was the very early sort of online community, and this guy Jeffrey Gray created a website on the Well for it. And so I went to his house with my photos, and he scanned them and uploaded them to the site. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I was like, blew my mind that these things could go right up, and now people can see them all over the world.
Pretty new thing at that
now
time.
you just do that with your phone anytime. And so then, this is a little complicated. So then after that, our friend Stuart Manger, we mentioned, we were working at this company. It was an interactive agency in Palo Alto, and they created this thing, iStorm.
Right.
And iStorm was like an online magazine, and it was covering various interesting topics, and one was Burning Man. And we went out to Burning Man '96 and did a live stream. It wasn't quite a live stream, but I would run around shooting videos, come back to the RV, we'd digitize them into QuickTime files, and slowly upload them forever to the website.
In Bruno's Motel downtown Gerlach.
Well, no, this was using the. I think John Gilmore brought in a satellite-based internet connection through the Oregon Country Fair.
Yeah,
remember?
Gilmore was
and
helping
it was
that
amazing.
year,
So we had this very basic internet connection in there, and so then we created a website that was still outside of Burning Man in '96 through that, and then in '97 is when we brought. Basically, when Marion Goodell got involved with Burning Man, she created a web team, and Eddie Goodell, who's here, was part of that web team.
Eddie, thank you very much. Eddie's been a great help, shot the show, photographed the show for me.
So we all got together and planned, building out the site that would actually now be part of Burning Man organization. So, transfer the domain, everything over to them. And so then I became the day-to-day webmaster from '97 to '99, making, changes to the website. So Larry Harvey would send me a Word document with his changes instead of, instead of just the changes, he'd send me the whole Word document again, and I'm like, no, I just need the changes, because I'm hand coding this stuff in HTML, and I just, so
Yeah.
So yeah, and I did that, and we had designers and other people for the day-to-day stuff, all the changes, and also setting up all the regional email lists. Each time a new city would get
for
involved.
Cacophony Society, Scott set up the regional email list
So
originally for
So
Cacophony.
for Cacophony, I registered cacophony.org because cacophony.com was a band.
Oh, it was a band, yeah, that's correct.
So you guys, why didn't you register that domain?
I don't know.
I'm just kidding. So anyway, I got .org and created subdomains for each of our lodges, which is our cute way of calling our chapters.
Yeah, Reverend Al in Los Angeles came up with the idea of having lodges much like the Moose Lodge. So the early Cacophony lodges.
I had Portland, LA, and then I'd send them their login information, and then it was up to them to build whatever site they wanted, and then they could have Cacophony addresses, and they could promote their events.
Correct, and that was was kind of our introduction to that whole world of the internet. There are other things that we're doing. Like most of the people we were working with, and most of the people in these earlier iterations of Cacophony and Burning Man, we didn't have any money. We were pretty broke, and we had a lot of artist friends and a lot of painter and performer friends who were kind of broken. So we started a thing called the Tentacle Sessions. Right. It was in '90. I don't know if you folks remember that or not, but that was Danielle Engelman, Michael McGillicuddy, Scott and I first started it, and then several other people became involved over time. And we originally conceived of the thing as a way to get our friend Dr. Hal Robbins a paying gig at least once a month. And so he's one of the most brilliant and just off-the-cuff, wonderful speakers and performers I've ever known.
What we would have is we'd have artists talk about things that you don't know them for.
Right.
So whatever they're known for, they don't talk about that at all. They talk about all the other stuff.
All the other stuff they're interested in.
Side of them.
Yes.
And we did that for
dinosaurs
a long time.
Hal talked about dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, right.
Okay, which not everybody knew that he was into.
And by the way, the archive is still online. I think it's sessions.laughingsquid.org.
Yeah.
So you can see all the artists, and I mean, there's some video and stuff too.
We had writers, and I think it was one of the first of that type of I think the first
Salon.
I knew of that type of salons,
kind of,
or a recreation of the salon from the 30s. That was kind of what we're thinking.
And we bounced around venues. We started in North Beach and different places,
And then others came later, like
Cafe
Dorkbot. Karen Marcello's here, who started Dorkbot right over
Dorkbot.
here, which is very much in that vein. And so we felt we were part of a long tradition with that, of gathering together, collecting together, friends, artists, people that were super talented and creative, and maybe not all of them making a good living at it, and get them some kind of exposure. We would go to bars and good places like the Black Cat in North Beach, and we'd offer to take their Sunday night when they didn't have any business, and we'd bring in 50 or 60 people 40 people on a Sunday night. And so that worked out pretty well for, I don't know, how long did we do that, about 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
And then, I'd like to talk about, the tentacle, the Squid blog. I mean, how did that come about?
The Laughing Squid blog,
Laughing Squid blog. Does everybody know what that is, what the Squid blog is? Familiar with that?
So originally, it was just a collection of links. So I'd met all these artists, and I had categories, and then machine art, especially, because machine art was like a very, San Francisco is very much known for that, and it was kind of like, so I list all the different groups in different categories. And then it kind of evolved where on the front page I'd sort of a pseudo blog where I'd kind of list different different information of upcoming things and things that happen. And then I slowly turned that into a blog, and then it evolved from there.
Which was a fairly there weren't that many blogs with that.
Yeah, I mean it was they officially turned into a blog in 2005, which is still pretty early for that.
Yeah, and you worked with some of the guys. You knew some of the guys who started Twitter.
Yeah, I knew all the founders of Twitter. I mean, which is weird now because Twitter has a whole different thing. But
Craig from Craigslist.
Okay, that's a good story. So there's this thing called a non-salon, which a lot of you guys know about.
Yeah.
The longest running rent party in San Francisco.
Spoonman Mark Petrakis and Joe Bullock and Marcia Crosby.
I was saying it was about the longest running rent party.
Longest running rent party in San Francisco history.
But it was great because
really awesome.
They had a couple floors, and each room was a different theme, and then they intersected with the Burning Man people, and they would bring them in, and it was this rotating. I mean, even one time I remember I ran into Mickey Hart, and we're like, you would love it at Burning Man, the drum circles, and I was just...
we were actually considering banning drum circles around that time.
Wait, before we get... that's where I met Craig Newmark, which you guys all know from Craigslist, and this was 1995. And another guy you might know, Brian Zisk, who did this thing called San Francisco, which is also an events list. So the three list guys would talk about our lists in the corner of Non-Salon,
Yeah, and this is how many people in the city found out what they might want to be doing, something a little bit out of the ordinary or unusual, or some of the more standard kind of events. And it was a precursor to a lot of the later web stuff that popped up. And then there's Craig Newmark, who I'm pretty sure was influenced by an earlier group called the Roommate Referral Service, which goes way back in San Francisco. Does anybody remember the Roommate Referral Service? Okay. Well, the Roommate Referral Service was played. A guy named Oz Kusid, Joel Kusid ran it, and it was on I think Schrader Street, right off of Haight. And that group, he had been partners with Gary Warren, who's one of the co-founders of the Suicide Club. And they shared a space which was later the Circus of the Soul bookstore, and he ran his roommate referral service out of that. And you'd come in and you'd say, "This is what I want. I'm looking for an apartment in this neighborhood, and maybe one roommate, and here's my price range." And so that started, and then Oz moved out of Gary's bookstore probably in 1977. And then started his own spot, and then kept doing that. And I'm pretty sure that was a big influence on the later Craigslist and the idea of exchanging information. It was like the earlier analog version of that. So that sort of thing always kind of amazed me. So anyway,
well, what's next?
I don't know. What do you want to talk about next? We talked about Cacophony.
We talked about that.
SantaCon, you want to go into that?
No, SantaCon's a good one because so after I did the Alonzo film, now I had a camera and stuff like that. So 95 was a huge pivotal year for me. So went to Burning Man, and then came back, and then got involved with Cacophony, and then went to my first SRL show, Crime Wave.
Survival Research Labs, yeah.
Blew my mind. I mean, and I got on Dave Class, the guy. Right. That I was talking about earlier, I found a payphone down, and I called him. You have to come down here. They're setting something up. I don't know what it's going to be, but you have to see this.
Yeah,
right?
and Survival Research Labs.
It's going to be incredible.
Not generally known for this, but one of the main influences on Burning Man, on all the fire and early fire and machine art at Burning Man, and there's absolutely no question to that. Most of the really interesting, actually all of the fire artists and machine artists, most of them in the early days had apprenticed or worked on SRL shows before going to Burning Man. So, little known fact.
So I was still shooting photos. So our friend Joe Fenton, who was running security, said, "Look, if you help me work the door and that sort of thing, then when the show starts, I'll put you right in front." And of course, I didn't realize what right in front of an SRL show was.
He wanted to use you as a body shield, Scott. He didn't tell you that at the time.
I don't think I even signed a release. Okay,
he wanted to use you as a body shield. So
anyway, So and it was amazing, and then I start recognizing a lot of these people I know. John was involved, and other people. And in fact, that's where I met Eric Paulos. This kind of segues.
Eric Paulos, robotics professor at UC, who was slumming it at SRL and building all these.
But he was
things.
hosting Cal Speletich, the Siemens site, on a Berkeley subdirectory, and then so that's kind of when I started. I said, well, why don't we get Siemens.org, and we could set up a website. So that was kind of. So that's a segue on that. But back to 95, then the last thing in 95 was SantaCon, and that was in the rough draft. And so I went to Justin Pee Wee Herman Plaza, right? And
Justin Pee Wee Herman Plaza.
So this is I was telling our friend David here about this last night.
Okay.
So I'm still just participating in this. I don't quite know how Cacophony works stuff, but I observe how things are done, and I'm like, these guys have radios. They're a little more organized, right? I didn't know until later. Of course, they had radios at Burning Man. We were
listening to the cops.
BLF.
At SantaCon in '95 that Scott filmed. I had a wire in my ear, and I was listening to the police calls on the police band radio. So I knew that they were going to deploy 6 paddy wagons. So I knew they were serious because they called for 6 paddy wagons, and that's when we decided to get the hell out of downtown.
So I shot photos of that, and then so next year, that's when we effectively were kicked out of San Francisco. Right. I mean, basically, he kicked us out of, was it Union Square, and we went out to try to crash the Chronicle party.
We weren't going to trash it. We were going to enhance it.
Crash.
Oh, crash.
Because we thought, because Herb Cain was there, and we were going to crash the party, but he'd already left because, he had to go to bed early, I guess.
Yeah. The first SantaCon in '94, which the only real record of that, I can't even find any photographs of it, but Stuart Mangum wrote a piece about that's pretty funny. And then we didn't really record any. The second year in '95, there were 2 videos, at least 2 or 3 people shooting video.
And this goes back to the email thing. And so '96, basically our friends at Portland Cacophony offered to host it for us. So we had all these different groups, chapters.
Yeah, after we got shut down by the police in San Francisco in '95, basically we weren't going to do it again. We're like, oh, this is a dumb idea.
But we were organizing it naively maybe on an email list. And so it turns out that they got leaked out to the SFPD, and they warned Portland PD.
Right.
But we didn't know this. So I was going to do a documentary about the Portland SantaCon. So I started shooting everything, and so we all got on the same Southwest Airlines flight from Oakland to Portland.
60 of us, and back then it helped to have a travel agent. Do you all know what a travel agent is?
Travel agent.
So Nancy Freeberg, who was a Cacophony stalwart, was a travel agent and a very good one, and she booked 60 Santas on a Southwest. I think it was a Continental or a Southwest flight. Southwest flight.
And this is amazing to think of now, but the pilot came out. I have video of this. A pilot came out. We put a Santa hat on the pilot, and we're all everyone's drinking. It's a total. We have the whole. Yeah, so I made the documentary in the style of.
And the documentary is called "You Better Watch Out."
Let's not get ahead, because this is sort of the reveal. We didn't know about the cop thing yet. When we landed, we were greeted by plainclothes police.
We were greeted by.
Of course, John is the first person to talk to him, like he always does. And
the Portland Police Department Intelligence Bureau.
Yeah, that's right.
Met us in the lobby of the airport, and we had a parlay with them, and they had a SWAT van up on the drive around.
So anyway, throughout
I'm not making this up.
Throughout the entire weekend, we were met with cops in various forums all over the place. We went to the Saturday.
It was not fun.
We went to the Saturday market. We went to the Portland Saturday market, and we were, vendors were all kind of avoiding us, didn't want to do with us. And then one of them finally showed us the memo they got from the Portland PD telling us about this anarchist group that was coming from San Francisco.
The Portland Police Department had sent out memos to all the business owners. So all these hippie vendors in the Portland in the park right along the river there were closing their shutters and not letting. And so there's one guy. There's an Orange Julius stand, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll sell you an Orange Julius."
I have video of this.
He had a line of 60 Santas waiting to get an Orange Julius.
Yeah, we gave him a lot of business.
I was yelling at the other vendors, going, "You come on, look at you hippies! Look at this guy. This guy is Santa friendly. He's making some money here." Okay. So
December.
Yeah.
So we shot this whole thing. I don't know if I should give away. There's the climax sort of the film. So anyway, we're gonna go to the mall. We're Santas, right? So we're gonna go
the Lloyd
Center Mall, and so we're all ready to go. And when we see these cop cars, I'm like, all right. And they're opening their trunks, and they start putting on riot
body armor.
And I'm filming this, so what's gonna happen?
And we're in the park. We're in this public park. And all of the Santas have been out in different groups going around to different divertissements all throughout the day. My group went to a roller skating rink. There were about 60 of us.
Oh, and by the way, it's where Tanya Harding skated.
Oh, yeah. You wanted to go to the Lloyd Center to watch Tanya Harding skating, because we were told by our Portland correspondents that she'd be there working out on the ice rink. So that's why the Santas wanted to go there. So we have a parlay. Marcy McFarland, Santa Cupcake from Portland, who's one of the main organizers in Portland. Victor Hunstra and I had a parlay with a police lieutenant, a police captain, and the head of security for the Lloyd Center in the park across the street from the center. And they're saying, look, you cannot go. And this is he filmed this. Yeah. I'm not making this shit up. He filmed it. So, okay. And we'll tell you where you can see it later. But we're having a parlay with them, and they go, look, I opened my wallet and I said, look, we have credit cards. We're not here. You guys have been following us around for 2 days. We haven't done anything. We're not going to do. We want to go in the center. We want to go in the center and sing Christmas carols. And that's all we want to do.
But basically, I get back home with this. I'm like, what am I going to do with this footage? It totally changed from what I thought it was going to be. So I made it in the style of a Dragnet episode with the voiceover. And I had my friend who was the narrator for my previous documentary, and also the announcer at a wedding, and all these other things. We had an announcer. That's a whole other story. And so did the Dragnet style thing, and because the cops are all through it. I mean, it was like this running theme. I'd never seen like that.
So
before.
We're in the park, and the cops don't. They don't know. They still don't know. They're expecting us to be crazy anarchists to violently destroy stores or something. That's the word they got from SFPD, which is complete bullshit. But we didn't know what to do, and it kind of broke our spirit in a way. And Marcy McFarland had this idea. She said, look, let's just go over there and sing a Christmas carol. So we started yelling, hey, let's go. And so all the Santas started collecting, and we're running that quarter mile through this park and gathering in steam until it was like a giant bunch of Bedouin coming up over a sand dune or something.
But you were very specific about singing nice Christmas carols.
And the cops had lined up in front of the shopping mall, and they had popped their trunks and had their body armor on, and they were ready for us, right? And we run right up to the street. There's maybe 200 Santas, and we get in a line, and we do a human wave, and we sang Jingle Bells. and not even with dirty lyrics,
clean
with
version
with
of
regular Jingle Bells lyrics.
Not from our printout, which was
he
like,
filmed this, and then we do the human wave. We wave it, then we go Merry Christmas, and turn around and walk away.
And we all get on the Max and head back downtown.
Yeah, and so that was, it's like the idea wasn't to fight anybody. The idea was to kind of like,
it is online. Just search. It's called you better watch out, Portland SantaCon 96. So just you'll find it. It's on Daily Motion because I don't have the rights to any of the music, and YouTube. Basically, when you put it on YouTube, it becomes a silent film. So it's
And so like a lot of like, what's that, Shibumi?
Chris didn't
that
go,
was not Chris Radcliffe didn't go to Portland SantaCon because he was the bad Santa in the last SantaCon in San Francisco. And I told him, I said, if you go, I'm going to duct tape you to a pole in Robert Burke's bus, and you're not, because it's a long story, but he didn't go that year. But
that's
point being. These are all like events and things created by people who just didn't want to fucking pay. Most of people have been involved in this sort of thing. It's like you don't want to buy all of your entertainment. You don't want to buy your relationships with people. You want to like create things that are not monetarily based. That's what all this stuff was about, really, at its core, was connecting with other people. In a real intimate and a heart sense, and creating your own reality that's not based on commerce. It's really simple. There's no rocket science to any of this, right?
Yeah. All that stuff blew my mind. That was only my second year of involvement. I mean, literally, there's like so much, and then of course that is also that was after Burning Man '96. I mean that's I'm saying crazy years of stuff.
So is there? Oh, defenestration. Yeah.
Right, that was '97.
Yeah. So we had a question about defenestration. I'd say that defenestration, which was organized by the artist Brian Goggin, it was kind of the last major conclave of different weird underground groups in San Francisco.
By the way, John had already left Burning Man at the time. He was working with everybody.
But it wasn't a Burning Man event. It was before Burning Man kind of like absorbed everything. And so much to Brian's credit, he wasn't a joiner so much, but he was definitely, like, Cacophony was a group of people who weren't joiners, I mean, there were people who really weren't in most groups or wouldn't be accepted in most groups.
I have a segue on this. So that's when I started doing some PR work. I was actually trying to help get the word out about stuff, and so defenestration was like it was a massive event.
There's a street closure. Christina Harbridge, who's here, worked on getting the permits. It was actually a permitted event. She got to help to get the permits for the street closure on Howard Street, right in the middle of this incredibly busy traffic lane. Right. And the building, the defenestration building, which many of you probably remember, was a building with all the defenestrated furniture crawling out of the windows. And Scott Generic did fire twirling off of that's a funny story. Scott was up on the roof, and he was doing this major fire twirling thing, and we had like 20 people spotting all of the embers to make sure we didn't catch this incredibly like dry building on fire. And we had buckets of water everywhere and fire extinguishers. We made sure, but the cops started coming in. We saw them coming in the bottom floor, like about 15 cops. Yeah. And we literally, and I'm holding the guy's belt, so he doesn't fall off of the, we have him rigged in so he can't fall off the edge of the building, and drag him back in, and we were literally going down one fire exit while they were coming up the central onto the roof. Literally missed us by about 10 seconds. Yeah.
So I also shot a video of all that and kind of made a little rough cut for Brian. But I mean, he had this first meeting, invited us there, and we were in the basement in the dark, and he's explaining he has access to this building and he's going to do this crazy project.
Yeah. So I don't know, collaborative work. I don't know. Do you want to give it to questions now? I'm sure there'll be at least a couple of questions out there. So we're gonna give it to questions, and the way we're gonna do it is the way we're gonna do the questions is whoever asks the question, I'm gonna repeat it in the microphone so you can understand what the question was. So we're gonna start taking questions here. Any questions?
I want to go on that same note about Santa's.
She really wants to.
Oh, right. So we have a question about
where's the one true Santa?
Where is the one true Santa?
One true Santa?
One true Santa. One true Santa.
Going once. There he is.
Right. There he is, right over there. There's the one true Santa right there. So there was a big contingent of clowns. This is the first event this is the first event where the enmity between clowns and Santas was born. Was at defenestration. So
mortal enemies.
Any questions? No, everybody knows everything already. That's pretty cool. Right. This is good. In the back. Is it true that Scott did the first Burning Man website in his closet Is that?
No, where did that come from? That's a good
That
one.
was a question from Cassandra. So what was the first?
No, it was actually our friend Brian Bellendorf. He hosted it on his
Brian
server.
Bellendorf
Oh,
had
that's
it on his
actually a good
server.
story because he hosted Burning Man and SF Raves, which is a rave community resource, and he was our first host. That's where he hosted Laughing Squid, and for very tech
And
people.
then Richard Peterson with ZPub was
Yeah,
the
he was
first
doing a
cacophony.
cacophony.
Yeah, it was the
so
first cacophony.
I used to email him for Unix commands, which is kind of funny, right? So that's how I kind of learned the basics of running a server, which then led to me getting my own server and then hosting myself. So Brian, who's very involved in the early, he was involved with Hotwired and
Yeah, and so for
the
the also
Apache
for the Laughing
Foundation.
Squid websites and the web folks, you would allow sometimes help the different artists and friends
we
build
hosted,
their own.
we hosted about
and then
100
hosted for free.
100 sites, like Dave Krizik, who was here earlier, who
Yeah.
does the Brainrush Drive-In Film Festival. And,
All right, yeah.
So a lot of those guys, Cal, Art Car Fest, like so many people.
One
the
in the back,
lab,
David?
the lab. A lot of people in this room. I mean, we've hosted and still host.
I'll get you in a minute. David?
We can't name Chicken John here. He just verboten.
I can't hear. What? Okay, David in the back said made a comment that the Suicide Club, Cacophony Society, what was the other one? Early Burning Man, were examples of philosophy turned into infrastructure. Okay, that's a comment. I won't disagree with that.
I'm gonna update my business card.
I know, yeah, like. So, and this is from a historian and a lecturer and a philosopher, I would say as well. So.
Yeah.
What do those groups have in common? Dangerous and stupid idea you can't really stop.
Curiosity.
I don't know. What else would they?
Curiosity. Open-mindedness. I mean.
People.
Right.
People. Expanding their horizons while trying to get laid. I mean, I don't know. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on. Any other questions? Katie Bell, did you have an actual question, or are you just going to yell at me?
She needs.
We have 100 people waiting expectly for your question.
She needs a voice interpreter. Oh yeah, she was saying this before. She has a point.
I just want to say that the Squid List, I moved back from New York in 1998 and I started producing shows in 99. So while everyone thinks I might have been there, I wasn't there in the night. Yeah, I lost it. But I will say is that Scott Beale changed everything. None of us knew who was doing what unless you knew the person, or unless you're fucking the person or living with them. You didn't know what you didn't know. Right. And the Squid List changed everything. And that it grew to like 800 people, and those 800 people were on the backdrop of everything that you've heard tonight. They're everything. They're your history. They're why you're here. Take a knee, bitches, because I couldn't have done anything without the two of them, but especially that one on the left. I couldn't.
So yeah, thank you for that, Katie Bell. It's very correct, and I'd say it's true. As far as communication, as our community grew and more people became involved, Scott was integral component, like the integral component for connecting people before it just blew up into thousands of people. Okay, and that's how we knew about what was going on, how we knew what our events that our friends were creating.
And so that's still really
on.
what we do. It's always about letting Laughing Squid does letting people know about interesting stuff. Now on the blog, or even about hosting. We're hosting people so they can get their interesting stuff out.
Bix? Krista Kroll? Okay, we're giving a shout out from Bix for Krista Kroll, LA Cacophony. Okay. Right. So, once again, the connection came from personal connections, through people who were involved early in the LA Cacophony. And so, yeah. So, Right on. Okay, other questions? Right over here. What have we found the most exciting in the last 3 to 5 years going on? I can answer that for myself personally. I'm involved, we've remained involved in urban exploration a lot, which is something I got involved in when I was a child. And being childish human, I still do it. I'm still very much interested in it. And there's a great international web work of people who are involved in urban exploration. It's an entire world. From the Instagram kids who are 16 and showing off and taking these photos of themselves nearly dying, which is not recommended at all, to the people, some of the people in the room here right now who are extreme explorers who go all over the world to look into live infrastructure sites and abandoned buildings and tunnel systems and to record these things. And I really believe that's an important field because it cannot be mediated by a company, it cannot be mediated by a government, it cannot be controlled because it is illegal to go into most of these places. You're not supposed to. So you can't monetize it. Like people always ask me, why don't you do these events for money? Okay, because I would fucking hate it, you know, because it wouldn't be fun, because I would be a servant for rich people. And that's not what it is about for me. It's not what it's about for me. And nothing against rich people who want to buy cool things, you know, some of them are okay, some of them are dicks or whatever, but it's not what it was about. It was about doing unmediated, non-commercial events. And urban exploration is the one field where they cannot monetize it. They tried to. Red Bull will hire some guy, but the liability is simply too great. You can't bring a bunch of people paying money into a place they're not supposed to be in, because the first guy that stubs his toe is going to sue you and he's going to win. And so that's why you can't do it. So it's a great field. And also learning about the urban infrastructure, understanding how the world actually works physically is incredibly important. And many people, particularly internet people who live online, have no idea how any of this stuff works. And to me, it's a really important thing. So what's exciting to you these days? You know, the question was kind of.
It's always funny. I was thinking, like, I did so much in that time. Not that I still. I mean, it's just. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the same. It's obviously things have changed and everyone's sort of spread out. And
you're a successful small business.
I mean, obviously,
owner.
Laughing Squid evolved into a business. I mean, it didn't start off that way, and kind of morphed into that with the web hosting. And, we do focus on WordPress, and it's still, like, helping people get their message out. And then we have the blog, which we're curating.
Right, the Squid
daily,
blog, which is curated. And Lori Dorn, who's here,
Lori
who writes many of the posts. My hero, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Get the word out about artists who otherwise
Right.
wouldn't be known.
From Lori Dorn, getting the word. Part of what their drive is to get the word out about
But
artists
also,
that would
giving attribution is a really big part of what we've always done, even photo attribution and everything, because so much stuff gets ripped off. A lot of very popular websites just rips at Facebook and everything.
And my presentation here, my whole show, well over half of this work, 2/3 of it, is all collaborative work, and there are many, many people involved in it, and they're credited as much as humanly possible, and it's about collaborative. It was always about collaborative work. Burning Man was not the work of any one person or even a couple of people. It was a collaborative effort coming out of a vibrant, existent underground culture that was in San Francisco, quite alive. You know, nobody cast a rib on the desert and there was Burning Man. That's not how that happened. You know, not me, not anybody else. So, any other questions? We got another from Shibumi.
Thank Scott.
Keep it tight. Keep it concise. What's the question?
She wants to know what a merkin is.
Oh, you want to know what a merkin is?
Let's crowdsource this.
Let's crowdsource that. Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Wait, actually, does anyone show and tell? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
we really devolved pretty quickly.
Molly, how international was the Squid List?
That's a good question. I was fairly local, but I think as Burning Man, because that was still, Burning Man was sort of the thread that ran through all this stuff, and I think as more people started coming to Burning Man from all over the world, but the thing is, it was only local events, so I know we had some people on it that stayed on it because if they happened to come to town, but that might be more national. International, maybe not as much to local events. So, yeah.
Okay. We'll take maybe 2 more questions, and then we're going to, right here. Hey, everybody kind of quiet down, please. I can't hear. Quiet down, in the back. What do we like about what? You're asking me what I
Oh,
like
that's
about...
a good question for John Law. He's actually never talked about it before. I mean, all of you guys, he never, ever mentions. I mean, he has no opinion at all.
I think there are a lot of amazing people who do a lot of amazing things, and it's a wonderful thing in general. How's that? Burning Man. All right.
Wow.
Is that enough? Is that enough?
You're actually a lot harsher than you normally are. I mean,
No, sorry. One more question. One more question.
I would like to know your thoughts about the virtues of publicizing these events and the whole radical inclusion philosophy versus what is lost when something becomes super popular and mainstream and ceases to be underground.
You got
well,
an answer for
actually,
that?
in a way, I actually used to say underground art and culture, and I took that off because it was almost pretentious.
There is no underground.
Because, as the web evolved, there really wasn't an underground, unless like the events you've done where you confiscated everyone's phones and you really take them out. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It changed a lot. There, good example, night market, right? People
The
were
night
checking
market
in
event,
on
yeah.
Foursquare and giving the location out. So yeah, it's
At the last second.
It's really hard, right? A lot of that's gone away
Very
unless
difficult.
you purposefully try to,
And
keep
I've done
it
some
off the
events
radar.
where you have to keep them controlled in numbers, where you take away all media from people, including the organizers. I did a thing with my friend Mark Groudon called Covert, and everyone had to give up their phones, any cameras, including the organizers. I did not have a phone, a camera, or any kind of device. So for the course of the event, and the only images we told people, anybody who snuck a camera in or anything, took a photo, they were forever 86 from our events. And so nobody did. So the only images that exist are Mona Caron's hand sketches that she drew of the events. That's the only thing that exists from these three pretty fun, pretty singular events.
That's the only way like all your urban exploration stuff's that
Right,
way
and
too,
the urban
right?
exploration, the kids don't put it online. I mean, there are conventions in cities all around the world where 200 or 300 people will show up from all over the world, and you cannot find it online.
It's all about
Doesn't live
it's all
online.
about also not posting entry points and all
Right.
those things.
Urban exploration is about the people who are really into it, and the good people in Urbex do not do what's called burning locations. They don't put them on media, and they don't burn locations. Yeah, and it's a special thing to be in these locations, and that's where the whole Leave No Trace thing in Burning Man came from. It came from the Suicide Club, where we'd sneak into abandoned buildings, and we wouldn't even steal or leave garbage in them. That's how nuts we were. You know, it was like we didn't want to damage or change the environment. My friend John Gilmore, one time, he told me, because he was in the Suicide Club, and he came on an event that I did climbing the Golden Gate Bridge. He was a smart guy. He figured out how to do it. And I ran into him on the street one time. He said, "Oh, man, me and Barlow just climbed the Golden Gate Bridge, and we put 'We Are Everywhere' stickers up there." And I'm like, no, you have to go back and get them. So he went back and took the stickers down, because he didn't realize the idea is like you don't want people to know you were there. That's the whole point. So,
What about, when you did Free Tibet?
Free Tibet? Free Tibet.
No, wasn't that Woody Harrelson?
No, you mean the Golden Gate Bridge? No. Oh, you're asking about the Woody Harrelson and Greenpeace climbed the Golden Gate Bridge. Is that what I don't know what you're talking about.
I think that's a bumper sticker, isn't it?
So we're going to
I
get
saw
started.
that.
We're going to have some music outside, some really wonderful friends. Mateus Drago's band, Spiral Electric, which is a wonderful, really wonderful band. And my friend Mia's band, Dizzy Twin. And Mia's a longtime San Francisco rocker. She was a member of Mud Women, which was the first band to play at Burning Man, the very first band to play at Burning Man in 1993, an all-woman punk rock band. And her new outfit, Dizzy Twin's going to play, and then the Spiral Electric. So please have a drink. Thank you very, very much for coming. Thanks to ProArts for having us here. Thanks for Scott Beale for coming out.
Thanks for being a friend for 25 years and
Thank you very
showing
much.
me all kinds of weird shit.
Well, likewise, and thanks for being here and doing all that stuff with me. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have fun. Thank you.